Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I have got 5 great books to tell you about. I haven't yet talked about the plays that I saw during the week that I was in Stratford last week. And I'm not in the mood to talk about plays right now. So I'm just going to talk about 5 books. All of them have either queer content or they're by queer authors. And maybe in the next video, I'll tell you about the plays. When I was looking through the photos that I took on that trip to Stratford, there's one book that shows up a lot. Biography of X by Lacey. I started this on the plane on my way there. I read it during my downtime when I wasn't attending plays. There was this very comfy chair in my room at the bed and breakfast. I also enjoyed sitting outside on the porch, watching the squirrels and reading my book. In my previous video, I talked about 5 digital graphic novels that I also read during that trip. So this book was in between those. You can see it's a pretty fat one. And I finished it on the plane on the way home. And here's a photo in the Pearson Airport in Toronto where there was a sparrow hopping along near where I was sitting. So let me tell you about Biography of X. My feminist book club is going to be discussing this on Sundays, so I'm looking forward to that. Lacey is an American writer. She's published 5 books so far. She lives in Mexico with her husband. And this book has received a lot of attention. It's been on many best books lists, and it also won a Lambda Literary Award for lesbian fiction. It's a work of alternate history, so it's set in the US that separated into North and South and Western territories with very different governments. So if you like books like The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood or American War by Omar El-Akkad, it's along those lines. The premise is that a woman who's been going by the name of X, just the letter X, has died, and her wife, they were together for I think 5 or 6 years, her wife is grieving and wanting to know more about her wife's history. She was very secretive, used lots of aliases, and so the story is structured in as if it was a series of interviews as our narrator, who is actually a journalist, investigates and finds out more than she wanted to know, basically. I would say that I really appreciated this book, loved the language, but wouldn't say that I loved the book. I really liked it, and there were so many lines that I flagged and wanted to share. I was intrigued by the ideas, the social commentary, and human nature that she's exploring in this book. It does read like it could be nonfiction. There's all kinds of photographs and some scanned documents that are also included in the book. Lots of citations, footnotes, as if it was an actual biography. So it's a very intriguing portrait that's made of this woman, X, who's created by Lacey. There are real people included in here, like Emma Goldman, although in this case, the anarchist became the governor of the state of Illinois, and then later chief of staff for Franklin Roosevelt. David Bowie and Tom Waits and Susan Sontag are also in here. She name drops Durga Chu Bose. So, you know, I was thrilled to encounter those people and imagine what their lives would have been like in this alternate reality. If this hasn't made you want to read it, then listen to some excerpts. The trouble with knowing people is how the target keeps moving. She insisted that all that mattered was the present, and though I couldn't refute this notion, living in it constantly was unnerving. Romance is a closed circuit. Nothing makes a person less comprehensible to others than being in love. One more. Why would I suffer to write when reading is so much more pleasurable? I 100% agree with that. So the narrator was originally married to a man who was a sculptor before she left him for X. And his name was Henry. He was best known for a series of bronze statuettes of young boys, an homage to Degas' dancers. But according to his artist statement, their subject was toxic masculinity, a topic that had become popular after men had, millennia too late, become aware of its existence. And so this is one of the differences in the society that's portrayed in Biography of X, is that women are the artists and men tend to be more in administration or assistance to female artists. There's so much about art in here, so this was a great choice for Framed in September. I also flagged a passage that reminded me of a book that I had read recently, The Lover by Marguerite Duras. Often, X made the argument that our supposedly liberal society was illogically puritanical about age differences in romantic partners, that some 14-year-olds were more mature and capable than adults well over twice their age. I agreed this was a possibility, but it seemed sagacious teens were in shorter supply than lecherous adults, and lust itself has a transfiguring effect, a way of taking action and justifying it later. And this aspect of a teenager having an affair with an older person was something that really disturbed me in The Lover. So after I had finished discussing The Lover with a couple of buddy readers, that was Sarah from Roadworthy and my subscriber Louise, I went to look for what other people said about it. And I found a book discussion series that's been going on for over a decade in New York City called the Thalia series. Some of these are in the Hoopla database, including the one that discusses The Lover. And the four authors that they have on stage to do the book discussion include Katherena Lacey. So this discussion happened 10 years ago, which was shortly after Katherena Lacey's book, Nobody Is Ever Missing, came out, which I read at the time. But it was also cool that I was also reading her current book while listening to her discussion of The Lover. The other three people in that discussion were the author Kate Zambrino, the author Akhil Sharma, and the art editor for The New Yorker, Françoise Mouly. Now, Akhil Sharma had the same kind of reaction to the book that I did, which is bafflement. One of these other women, I can't remember if it was Catherine or Kate, said that they read The Lover every single year and get something different out of it every time. Well, my reaction is I never want to read anything by Marguerite Duras again. So, not every book is for every reader. But I did learn from Françoise Mouly a lot more about the style, Marguerite Duras' style, which is the Nouveau Roman style. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. Anyway, on to the next book, which is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden, who's a Dutch author. She wrote this book in English, and it is on the Booker shortlist, so you've probably heard of it. The author, I went to her website to find out more about her, and I loved what she had to say. Welcome. My name is Yael van der Wouden. I'm a writer and a teacher. Great small talker too, available as a +1 for your cousin's wedding. Here you'll find my works from fiction to nonfiction to a hybrid of the two plus some candy that I found in my pocket. That made me like her very much. I listened to the audiobook and it's read by Stine Nielsen and Saskia Maarleveld. It is a slow burn. It's set in 1961 in a country house, a rural house in the eastern part of the Netherlands. There's a family of 2 brothers and a sister, and the sister is the only one living in this house. She's single, and one of her brothers is queer, and so is she. I'm not going to give you anything else about the plot, although I have to say I did guess what was going to happen. I really like the way that everything unfolded, but there is a lot of sex in this book, very sensual, erotic, and I'm not the kind of reader who likes to read that. So with an audiobook, it's even more visceral to be listening to descriptions of sex. So I did do the fast forward several times to get past those passages. This woman, who's the central character, is not particularly likable, but I really enjoyed learning more about her. I found her quite fascinating. And this next book has a lot of fascinating characters in it too. It's Disembark, stories by Jen Currin. Jen Currin is a non-binary American-Canadian poet and author. These stories are all about queer characters and relationships. So all kinds of relationships between friends, between parent and child, between lovers, and many of them are quite realistic, but there are some fantastical elements in some of the stories. So for example, one of the stories has a banshee that shows up in the apartment of a lesbian couple who are, their relationship is kind of on the rocks. That story in particular reminded me of John Elizabeth Stintsey's stories in Bad Houses. Another story is set in the afterlife, where a mother and daughter reunite. The stories tend to be almost like vignettes. They're scenes, they're complete in themselves, satisfying. There's a blurb on the back by Carly Baker, and I did think that she was a good choice to write a blurb for this collection, because there's something kind of similar in the style and the stories as well as Carly Baker's writing. I'm not sure if the shape of a book affects how we react to it. So this is published by House of Anansi, and they've chosen this sort of shorter, fat style. I associate the shape with gift books. I'm just curious if any of you find that the shape of a book affects the way that you react to the contents of the book. I'm not sure if I do or not, but it's just something to think about. Anyway, I did enjoy this very much. And next is an audiobook that I also enjoyed very much, Real Ones by Katherena Vermette. Vermette is a queer Red River Métis writer who has published poetry, graphic novels for teens, picture books for children in all ages, as well as 3 other novels. And she has recently been appointed senior editor at Simon Schuster Canada. So, hooray for her. The cover art on this book is by Julie Flett, who is Cree Métis, and I am a huge fan of her collage style art. I'm really happy to see it here on this cover. The audiobook has a full cast of narrators: Katherena Vermette, Elle-Maija Tailfeathers, Sheila McCarthy, Tracey Nepinak, and Caleb Stull. It alternates between the voices of 2 sisters living in Winnipeg, where Vermette is also from. We have Lynn, who's an artist working with pottery. She's queer. And her sister June is an academic who's she's a Métis Studies professor. So their father is Métis, and their mother, Renee, is Mennonite and French Canadian. Their mother is estranged from the family for a long time, and she has been going by the name of Raven Bearclaw and has made a name for herself in the art world doing Indigenous style art. So at the start of this novel, Raven Bearclaw has been called out as a pretendian. So the topic that's being explored in this novel is the issue of pretendians. These are people who falsely assume an Indigenous identity, and how this harms real Indigenous people. It harms them by taking government grants, residencies, academic chairs, fellowships, employment opportunities that have been specifically earmarked for First Nations people. Katherena Vermette tends to go dark in her books, and I find in this one she's lightening up a bit. There's more humor. So for example, Lynn coming up with an artist statement for these pinch pots that she's been making, that was great. This is a book that fits really well for the Framed in September readathon. It's definitely art related, and I'm going to read you just one segment from Lynn. Art used to make me heal, or at least felt like it did, or else I wouldn't have kept doing it. I started to make art to fix myself, and it did save my life countless times. Or I thought it did. That's when I didn't know what I was doing. Just did it for fun. I did art like I was 4 years old. Played like no one was watching. Art is only healing when you think no one is watching. Once you do it for other people, it ceases to be yours. It becomes theirs, for them. That's okay. It's a giving. It's a gift to the world and for their healing. But you, the artist, you are then the healer, not the healed. I picked up another book for Framed in September that I am still working my way through, and it's also a Sorty September pick because it's a collection of Australian artists who are doing still life as a subject. Here's one that just resonated so much with this passage that I just read for you.
I became determined to paint daily, more for the healing it gave me than anything else. That's Anna Placidi.
If you have enjoyed Katherena Vermette's earlier novels that are a kind of a cycle related to the Strangers family, there's The Break, The Strangers, and Circle, I'm sure that you will also enjoy Real Ones. And last up is my favorite of the bunch. So the others I liked, or I really liked them. This one I loved. Oh, Lolly Willowes by Sylvia Townsend Warner. The content in here is not queer, but certainly a queer sensibility. The author was well known as being a lesbian. She was born in 1893, died in 1978. She lived for 39 years with another woman, Valentine Ackland, and this book, her first novel, was published in 1926. It's 161 pages, so I actually picked it up for Shorty September. It had been on my shelf for a while. This is a good time to read it. There's also a spinster-related readathon thing happening in September, and Lolly Willowes is a spinster. She is such a great character. She looked after her father until he died, and then after that, one of her two brothers took her in, and so she lived with that family as their children were growing up. She was Aunt Lolly. And it's not until she's in her 40s that she manages to break free from societal and familial expectations for a woman at that time. The language in here just is so delightful, so delightful. So once again, I am going to read a passage to you. This new year was changing her whole conception of spring. She had thought of it as a denial of winter, a green spear that thrust through a tyrant's rusty armor. Now she saw it as something filial, gently unlacing the helm of the old warrior and comforting his rough cheek. In February came a spell of fine weather. She spent whole days sitting in the woods where the wood pigeons moaned for pleasure on the boughs. Sometimes two cockbirds would tumble together in mid-air, shrieking and buffeting with their wings, and then would fly back to the quivering boughs and nurse the air into peace again. All around her, the sap was rising up. She laid her cheek against a tree and shut her eyes to listen. She expected to hear the tree drumming like a telephone pole. And as an example of her sense of humor, Laura had brought her sensitive conscience into the country with her, just as she had brought her umbrella, though so far she had not remembered to use either. It's described on the back as a great shout of life and individuality, an act of defiance that gladdens the soul, and I 100% agree. Love this so much. Now, when my friend Marilyn Maya Mendoza talked about this recently on her channel, and she set it aside. She didn't finish it. She said just because a book is short doesn't mean that it's easy. And That's exactly right. So for example, this book is in 3 parts, but other than that, there's no chapters. And so that can make for pretty dense reading. Be prepared for that. And for words that might be unfamiliar. So for example, when she's talking about wines that are made from wild foods, dandelion, cowslip, elderberry, ash key, or mangold. I had to look up what mangolds are. We call them sugar beets here. So there's the effort of long passages with slightly old-fashioned kind of lyric writing and words that might be unfamiliar. So be prepared for that. And another aspect about this book that might not work for every reader is that there is a fantastical element in the later part of the book that my friend Sean over at Sean Breathes Books did not get on with at all. So not every book is for every reader, but this one was so much for me. Anyway, that is all I've got for you today. So thank you so very much for watching. I always appreciate hearing from you, so please do say hello in the comments down below. Let me know if you've read any of these. Also, what do you think of the shape of books, and if that ever affects your reading of them? Curious about that. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna say goodbye. I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.